Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
In a world where three college football fans are headed into week 3 with completely different outlooks, one a simple educator from South Austin flying high after his team upset the Crimson Tide in Tuscaloosa, another a mild-mannered, even-keeled Piggy fan who is cautiously pleased that his Razorbacks made a much better showing against Kent State than the Ohio National Guard, but with a similar result. And finally, a lonely Aggie who is scrounging for his couch cushions for looks like $80 million after yet another lost week 2, this time in Miami Gardens.
God dang, Mr. Lamar, you use your mouth prettier than a $20 whore.
This, my friends, is Yell Fight Sooie.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to week 3. With us as always, I'm Andy Tomchesson. That's James Christopher. And finally, Scott McIntyre joining us after he decided to take a little trip to the ocean last week.
It was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
But we're all back and ready to talk about our, sometimes second favorite sport. Probably right now for Jim, his first favorite sport.
It's not bad. It's not a bad time.
So I guess let's start off
pretty
with
good to be Jim sports-wise, period, right now. I mean,
good weekend.
Between Dallas Astros and Longhorns, I think Jim's fairly decent mood, it would look like.
My cricket team lost, though, so I'm really hung up on that, though, unfortunately.
How's Texas look for Quidditch this year?
Yeah, well, we always dominate all the pretend sports, so that's good. Obviously, between the Astros really dismantling the Padres, and then obviously Texas, Alabama was chief among what I was thinking about this weekend. And I know we're going to get to what we think of going on this week, but I was obviously very, very happy, very, very pleased to see a team that not just I thought the game was not as close as the score. I thought it was nice to see Texas dominate on both lines of scrimmage. And one of the things I'm tired of people on the internet is somehow trying, and this is what happens when you're a Longhorn and you win anything, people trying to take away by saying, well, it's kind of a shittier Alabama team or whatever. They went in Tuscaloosa and handed Alabama their first double-digit loss since 2004. So that's what we're dealing with. The big question will be next week, or this week, I guess, or tomorrow, and how much of did they eat their own cheese, if you want to borrow parlance from Bill Parcells. So we'll find that out. I guess we'll talk about that later. But yeah, it was a good weekend.
So do you think both things can be true? Let's get into that just a little bit. I think Texas had an incredible performance. I think Quinn Ewers answered a lot of questions, especially after his, I would say, not satisfactory appearance against Rice. It looked like the team was kind of going through the motions, and a lot of teams in week 1 have trouble getting up for the cupcake opponent on their schedules.
In your 40s, you just have trouble getting up.
This is true.
Just wait.
But
this show brought to you by Blue Chew.
Yeah.
But I think as an SEC fan, I'm encouraged. None of us wanted you to win, sorry, but I'm encouraged by the fact that Alabama's got some issues that you guys highlighted. It does not appear that they can defend a pass downfield, which is interesting for a Nick Saban coach team. And their quarterback looks like hot garbage. Now, some of that obviously was Texas's defense. And Ewers, like I said, performing really well. But some of that, I think, Nick Saban's got some real problems in Tuscaloosa.
Of course, both things can be true. And in every single sporting contest, both things are always true. The problem that I have, too, is when we want to speak in absolutes. And yes, of course. Again, of course, both things are true. Texas was unable to take advantage of some of those same issues Alabama had last year, because they were not a great team last year either. This year, they took advantage of those things and handled it in a pretty rowdy environment, which they didn't play very well on the road either. Look, we're all three of us are smart enough to know that it's two teams that play a game, and you have weaknesses and strengths, and how you exploit them and guard against your own is always the situation. Like so much of what we do, Andy, on our other show, what we record on Mondays, whether we like it or not, we're always going to be commenting on the discourse that comes from the unwashed masses who don't understand nuance, and the fact that, This particular Texas team probably doesn't beat the Alabama teams winning national championships, just like the 2009 when healthy Texas team beats some of those Alabama teams that won national championships. Of course, all of those things are factors. I'm just I'm tired of that narrative, just like I'm tired of the narrative that I'm tired of the 09 narrative just as much. Obviously, it takes two to tango.
And I think that's a completely fair, rational take. And I don't know what you're doing on this show.
Yeah. My cricket team.
If you're Scott McIntyre and you get off the boat Saturday night, Sunday morning, what do you take away from beating on Kent State?
Is that for me? Is
Sure.
that for me? Is okay? I didn't.
Are you Scott McIntyre?
Yeah, sure. But you said if you are Scott McIntyre, I didn't know if you wanted Jim to pretend like he was me or something. I mean,
Hold on,
I got to shave my head.
And I mean, I could go on another 10 minutes without saying a word. Whoa.
Is Scott upset about somebody going on a long
we can replay. Yeah, we can replay the tape and see how many times you've already interrupted.
Once. Look, Arkansas and Kent State, they got the job done. And I realized that the first 2 weeks that there are parts of the offense that Arkansas has not shown. But there's still real concerns. The offensive line has to be a real concern for Arkansas fans. Now, they've been rotating 10 different players, but what that's meant is that there's not getting any push. That standard Arkansas run that people are used to seeing that are going, between the guard and the tackle and coming up the middle and playing that bully ball. Arkansas is not able to do that just yet. Now, is that because they don't have the talent up front, or is that because they've been rotating to find the talent up front? And I think this is the week that we have to find that out because BYU comes to town. So you can get away with doing that against Western Carolina and Kent State, but we made one of the worst teams in all of college football look like a rather decent defense last week, and I hope that's because they were holding things out of the playbook and trying to not have KJ Jefferson run in the first half, and that things will open up and look a lot better this week. But there are concerns in Arkansas.
So this is a common theme that I see in these early season games where you're playing teams you very obviously should beat. If you don't look good, every fan base assumes their play callers are holding something back. How much does that really happen at this point? And I think there's a difference between we're not going to directly scheme for Kent State because we should be able to out-talent them versus we're not going to show all of our playbook because magically we have new plays that we're just not going to even work on until week 4.
The only time I have ever seen it, and I can put my finger on it of yes, that's a thing that happened, was in 2008 when Texas played OU. They absolutely rolled out an offense that they had never seen before, where they were flexing Jordan Shipley into sort of a tight end position. Other than that, I'm not sure I've ever seen something completely different coming out of nowhere. So I do think that's a thing we tell ourselves to get through those first week. Like you said, being slow, maybe hard to get up. So
yeah, again, Freudian. Scott,
John, I think that what you're really seeing is just certain plays that don't get called, right? Certain areas, certain depth into the playbook that we don't go in week 1 or week 2, because you still are this isn't the old days where these guys had 2 a days or 3 a days in the old days, and you had plenty of time to, you could have the NCAA allows 4 weeks, but boys, we're going to be here 4 weeks before to prep. Those days are gone. So you can't get your playbook as established early on. I don't think that we've hit depths, and I do know that they were intentionally trying to not have KJ Jefferson run the ball. So those plays aren't being called. And if you're running an RPO and you're taking away the quarterback run threat, that really is limiting the offense. I don't think you're going to see new plays. Suddenly they're going to come out in a 4-wide spread and go crazy. I don't think anything like that's going to happen, but I do think there will be additional nuances to the playbook that are introduced this week that we haven't seen yet.
So, and to me, it's a little bit like spring training, right? People freak out about spring training results when you don't know what the pitcher was told to do. And very often the pitcher is told, hey, just throw change-ups today. I don't care about anything else. And they get rocked, and the fans worry about, this pitcher's toast in spring training. We need to sign somebody else. It's kind of a similar thing. I'm personally prefer the Mike Leach approach of we've got 4 plays, we're going to run them all the time. We're just going to do them really, really, really well.
Gus Malzahn much?
But I mean, there's something to be said for that, right? Because I think there is, unless you're just completely out talenting somebody, you get better through repetition. And if you, basically ignore a part of your offense or even a certain set of plays through the first 3 weeks of the season, if you've got a soft schedule, and then all of a sudden in week 4, hey, we got to run these, and there are a lot of timing involved, but we just did it in practice, kind of. It feels like you're setting yourself up for something. I don't know. It's just, you said it, and it's always been something that I've wanted to discuss because every fan base uses that. Every fan base uses it. We're holding back because we played, wrong way state this week.
Yeah, I don't think that there's pages of the playbook that they haven't looked at. It's just that you just don't install parts of your offense yet, right? The complexities to your offenses, the nuances, the growth, if you will. You just don't open those pages yet.
Well, let's turn the page a little bit, talk about a different topic.
You were looking for $80 million under your couch cushions.
Good Lord. I'm done. I'm done with Jimbo Fisher. I say that knowing that the entire season is still ahead of us, and conceivably you've got 10 more games and you could win 9 of those games and be in the hunt for the SEC West. But the reality is what they've shown in year 6 under Jimbo, especially against a Miami team that I don't know is that great. They put the same amount of points up against Bethune and Cookman last night, with little effort.
I don't think he's that bad.
TJ Durkin needs to go. He's not going to go anywhere, but he needs to go. His concept for how to play defense with the personnel he has does not work, and we've seen that now for 14 games. That's my bottom line right now. We were embarrassed in Miami, and we weren't embarrassed offensively because Bobby Petrino weirdly made halftime adjustments and figured out some things that Miami was doing. And then we changed up and scored 33 points, which we haven't scored 33 points against a Power 5 team on the road in a long time. I want to say since Jimbo's been there. But by God, you can't give up 48 points and 240 yards after the catch. Those two stats. I mean that thing is damning. Durkin doesn't want to pressure the quarterback. He appears to be playing contain and trying to play a bend don't break type of defense. The problem is he keeps breaking, so it doesn't work. You've got 4- and 5-star linemen up and down that defense, and they've done really well from a recruiting standpoint in those areas. And he can't seem to build a defense around those guys. I get we don't have the dominant defensive end that you would like to have for pass rush, but there are other ways to generate pass rush, and he refuses to do it. Last year, he was selling out to stop the pass, and the teams ran all over us. And this year, he's selling out to stop the run with a 3-down lineman set, which is just bizarre to me. And teams are passing on us. At least one team has passed on us so far. But I don't see anything that encourages me outside of Connor Wigman's performance about Saturday that makes me think, hey, next week against Auburn, we're going to show up. Or the week after that against Arkansas, we're going to show up. Or the week after that against Alabama, we're going to show up. I just don't – there's nothing that is encouraging if you're an A&M fan right now. And I say that knowing that I'm generally optimistic about these things, and – there is a world where we could win out. That's not going to happen. Jimbo the game, I hate to say this because I hate when people say this about coaches. I think it's passed him by. And if it feels like I'm laying a lot of blame on Jimbo's feet, well, he's the head coach. And if you're going to be in that CEO role and you see that your defensive coordinator has his cheese in the wind, I'll just use that word. It's going to use something else. You have to intervene. You have to stop him. You have to say, hey, why don't we, blitz? How about the 4-down line? Let's try that a couple of times. It's mind-numbing. And I said on our preview show that the Jimbo's either going to do really well this year or we're going to have a new coach next year. So I'm good either way. I'm heavily leaning on the new coach next year.
But let me ask this, Andy: if your offense doesn't have problems, if your defense is the problem, does Jimbo get himself another year? Does he say, "Hey, look, we need to make a defensive coordinator adjustment," and he, let's say you continue these issues, and he does that in a few weeks?
There's what I want and what's going to happen. Durkin needs to go, and I think Jimbo should go with him, because there is no selling hope in year 7 to recruits. There is no selling hope to a roster that you have to constantly re-recruit every year with new NIL and transfer rules. It is what it is. You know what the team is. The buck stops with the head coach. The head coach needs to go. Now, realistically, $80 million is a big piece of grass to swallow, to use a Les Miles parlance. So yeah, is Jimbo probably back next year unless we're 5-7 again? Probably. Should he be? That's a different question for me right now, because I just don't see anything you would expect from a 6-year coach to have been installed, other than we have really great facilities, and he helped spearhead a lot of that.
How much
a new coach can take advantage of new facilities.
Well, but I was gonna, and I'm not trying to be that guy. So if my question comes across of that guy, but how much does Texas, clearly on the rise and joining the SEC in a pitched recruiting battle, going to make the decision to get rid of Jimbo if it happens quicker? Because you can't sell hope in year 7, and here comes a national power that, at least on the surface, looks like it could be coming back to prominence.
I mean, there's some of that. We still have some ridiculous alumni who think that our entire, if we went, the old joke used to be, if we went 1-9 back when you played 10 games, and that one win was against Texas, that was a good season. Nobody my age or younger wants to get back to that mentality.
Yeah.
And we can't afford to get back to that mentality. So, and I don't mean any offense by this, Texas shouldn't be our measuring stick anymore. Is it for somebody and some people? Probably. Alabama should be our measuring stick. Georgia should be our measuring stick. And unfortunately, under Jimbo for the last 6 years, we've come up woefully short. And I compare Jimbo to those two coaches, those two programs, because he's paid like those two coaches.
Yeah.
He's been given the same things those two coaches have been given, from a facility standpoint, from a recruiting infrastructure standpoint, from a NIL standpoint. And we don't have anything to show for it. And so if there's a concern with Texas and OU joining the league next year, it's that we've had a 12-year head start and we've squandered it. That's a concern. But by and large, I don't want to get back to the place where it's just this constant dick measuring against the University of Texas. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not productive. And part of us leaving the Big 12 in the first place was that we didn't need to do that anymore. And we still don't. I would love to go back to where it's just to a place where it's just a game that we play every week, and it's a rivalry game.
Too. Yeah. I hate this rivalry so much.
And beyond that, it's not, it's like Alabama. You don't want to lose to them, but you move on with your life. But would that drive some Jimbo action? I don't know. Do you have an extra $80 million after you paid out OU's buyout?
It's kind of interesting.
Everybody.
It's kind of interesting, though, something you said, though, Andy. Excuse me. But teams that are new into the SEC, the newer teams from the last 30 years since expansion began, with South Carolina and Arkansas at the beginning, Missouri and A&M, and now OU and Texas. When teams enter the league, they just historically don't have the same success. A&M, Missouri, I mean, it's really strange to think of all the teams that I just mentioned that are already in the SEC. Missouri has probably had the biggest modicum of success because they were so good under Pinkel whenever they joined. But it's kind of the growth that it takes a team, and the expectations that the fan base sets. For A&M, I think those are higher than normal, because when you did come in at first and you had Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football went in and knocked off A&M. You guys have this tradition of actually being able to win a big game in the SEC. Now it looks like it's potentially falling apart. It's even more frustrating.
I do agree, and I think it'll be very interesting to work with Jim next year as he goes through that, because I think the difference, and I know most Jim I know is rational and he understands what I'm about to say. I know most of the Texas fans I talk about assume that the level of greatness they have had in the 70s and 80s, in the mid 2000s, is just their norm. And they're going to come into this new league and it's going to be business as usual. Sark's got things under control. We're going to move forward. We've got Ewers, and if he doesn't play, Manning's there. And if Manning doesn't play, we've got another quarterback that's just as good. Everything's going to work out. The reality is that it is much easier to get through the Big 12 schedule and get up for OU and get up for Texas Tech if they're good this year, or TCU if they're good this year, instead of going through the SEC gauntlet of every team that you're playing recruits better than you. And if you look at the recruiting rankings right now, I think Texas was 9th the last time I look at it. Maybe it's changed. I don't know if they've gotten a recent recruit, but 7 of the 8 teams ahead of them are all SEC teams. And that's what,
okay. The thing I'll push back on that, I'm not pushing it back against you, but I'm pushing back against Scott. Yes, you mentioned all those teams that joined the SEC. I'm sorry, Scott, but none of those teams are Texas with the recruiting ability and the financial ability that the Longhorns have. And so if any of those teams is primed to step in and be able to at least be competitive quickly, it is Texas.
It's not like the other teams are broke. It's not like the other teams are broke to begin with. And I will say
there's a difference, Scott. I mean, we have to acknowledge that there is a difference between Missouri and Texas. There's a difference.
Yeah, they're part of the SEC, and it gets real tough whenever you get over here. And Texas hasn't been Texas for the last 20 years. I mean, they really haven't. They have. It hasn't.
Well, I mean, I'm living here, Scott, but I'm saying that if you're looking at all the things Andy just mentioned, finances, facilities, history, you've not had a team join the SEC that is. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you talk about if there's any team that you think eventually could be good of the teams that have joined the SEC in the last 20 years, it's Texas, because they at least have the history of having done that before.
I think the difference for Texas versus a South Carolina, let's take our 2 schools out of this for a second, is that South Carolina, it took them 20 years to become a competitive organization, competitive football team in the framework of the SEC. I see it taking Texas closer to like 5.
Yeah.
Because of everything, Jim, you just talked about. I don't think anybody walks into this league immediately, and I can be wrong. Texas absolutely has a history.
I don't think they're going to, but I'm also not going to sit here and sort of be lumped into the ilk of Missouri.
No, it's not
South Carolina. And I'm sorry, Arkansas. Like, I'm not going to, because mathematically it doesn't add up. Andy, you wanted more spice this year, and here's the spice.
Well, okay, but the spice is that really, you guys are you're feeding off something. Yes, you've got a ton of ability. You've got a ton of money behind the school. But then it also begs the question, if you have all that money and you have all that structure, what happened under Tom Herman and Charlie Strong and the last few years of Mac Brown? You're in a great situation to move to the SEC this year because you have Steve Sarkisian, who's been there for a few years and is really growing something. You absolutely have.
You're having a different debate. The answer I'm saying is you wanted to lump up what our experience will be like joining the SEC with every other team that's come before it. And I'm saying that based on actual measurable factors, that is not the case. That Texas has a different advantage than any of those other schools that have joined the SEC. And to Andy's point, it took South Carolina 20 years. It might take Texas 5. That's different.
Yeah, but I think it's taken South Carolina even longer than that, because I think out of all the schools that South Carolina is not there. I will say this, I do follow what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. I do think Texas has the structure in place, but let's not make it sound like all these other schools are flat freaking broke. They're not. They have great infrastructures in place, and we're very much prepared for the move. When Arkansas made the move in the early 90s, Arkansas was a great, was just coming off 2 Cotton Bowls, 10-2 records. We're in a great position to come over, had the talent on the field, and the Walmart Tyson money structure was really starting to grow at the time too. So we were in a good spot, and it was hard.
Arkansas money and Texas money are different money. All you got to do is Google it, and you can find out. That's all I'm saying.
I don't even think that.
I'm not trying to be shitty about other schools, and I'm not. But I'm not going to also sit here and sort of, again, be lumped into.
I don't even think.
So I feel like for the year and a half of doing this show, I have been not that Longhorn fan. I sit back and whatever, and it's allowed pot shots, and I'm not taking pot shots anymore. That's where I'm at.
I didn't know anybody was taking pot shots. I just think that what we're trying to do is predict what's coming up in the future, and we'll find out. I mean, ultimately, we're going to find out. You may be dead right, and you guys come in and dominate this.
I never
league.
said that. That's the thing.
But I'm saying you guys may come in
that, and I did.
What I'm saying, you're going to come in and you're going to have success quicker than everyone else because the Texas structure and the money and the facilities, and you can bring in all of this, the great players and have the structure in place to move forward. Are you in a great position to do that? Yes. Is the SEC the absolute toughest place to do that? And is there going to be a learning curve? Yes. That's what I'm saying.
At what point did I say anything different than what you just said?
I think the learning curve is going to be harder than what Texas fans typically expect.
And I think I've made a pretty good point of separating myself from the average Texas fan, as has been pointed out on this show 10 minutes ago.
You got it.
Interestingly enough, in the great state of Colorado, there's another debate going on similar to this between two head coaches that probably shouldn't be talking to one another, but they are. This week, evidently, the talk of college football, let's start off there, has been Deion Sanders and what he's done in Colorado. Now,
future A&M head coach Deion Sanders?
You should hope not. Based on these 2 weeks, hope not. We'll have 85 new guys, and they'll all be hungry for their NFL paychecks.
I better take off my cap and sunglasses.
But, yeah, evidently it's rubbed some coaches the wrong way, the way Deion's gone about. And the coach of Colorado State is really upset that Deion does press conferences in hats and sunglasses because his mama didn't raise him that way.
It's almost like he's not watching Deion Sanders his whole career.
What Deion Sanders has done, and fully acknowledging that Nebraska's probably a crap team this year, and TCU is way overrated to be coming into the season at 17 with all the player losses they had. Having said all that, you can't ignore what Deion Sanders has done, how he's turned that very moribund program around in a very short amount of time. Even if they end up losing 5 games this year, there's excitement in Boulder, Colorado again. How much do we have to deal with this every week, though, that some coach decides that they're going to be the one that takes down Deion with words?
And how much, at what point are we going to have the conversation about, how much of it it's also I'm sorry, I hate to bring it, but it's like, would you be saying that about a white coach wearing sunglasses? I think they're doing it.
I wouldn't, because I don't care if you wear sunglasses.
I will say Jay Norvell, the head coach of Colorado State, because when that comment came out, I didn't realize Jay Norvell is also African American.
I didn't either. Okay, I never heard of Colorado State till 5 seconds ago.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Colorado State is we're talking about Colorado State in the 3rd week of the football season. When was I've never done that. I've never. I don't think I've ever talked about Colorado State. So yeah. I whatever they're doing, they're getting ratings. Game days there. It's on ESPN. 30-point underdogs are getting headlines in the news. Way to go, Colorado State.
Yeah. Oh, Colorado State's going to get run. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think you could put the Sanders kid and the two-way guy. I don't even remember their names. Throw them out on the field just against
Travis Hunter, I believe.
Travis Hunter, and throw them on the field against Colorado State, and those two by themselves would probably win. Colorado State, this is the equivalent of, I don't know, St. Pius High School in Houston, Texas, calling out the Dallas Cowboys. Nothing good's going to happen for that, other than you might get some airtime, to Scott's point. But a bigger picture for Deion, what is it? Everybody has said up until this, it's not going to work. Everything he's doing is not going to work. He's showing that it's going to work.
Yeah.
So I'll start with Scott on this. What Deion has done so far, how does that change what college football is, or does it? Does it augment it? Does it do, what's your take on where Deion is?
Deion Sanders is the intelligent coach who is taking advantage of the new rule set that the NCAA doesn't have their hands around very well. NIL, yeah, come on, we'll get you here. Transfer portal, sure thing, come on, we'll get you here. And what he's doing is he's selling coolness, and he's selling hope, and he's selling promise, with also the ability to get someone to the NFL, because hey, the staff's really good, and he knows they do know football. Okay, so CEO Dion has an exceptional staff under him, and they have a system that they're running. I think he is the guy who is 2 or 3 years ahead of everyone else, understanding the system. Everybody else will catch up. They're not there yet. The problem is that with someone like Dion, is he probably is going to stay a step or two ahead of people for quite a while. And when he bounces from Colorado and goes to an A&M or wherever he winds up, Florida State, wherever he winds up at next, he can follow this same MO and turn your program around like that. That's what he sold.
I'll go a step further. I think Scott's nailed it. And I also think that he speaks the recruiting language, and he can talk to these kids in a way that doesn't seem, like we always make fun of when you see I remember like the images of Tom Herman, like trying to be hip with the kids and all that stuff. And it just seems like Steve Buscemi in that episode of 30 Rock. Whereas I think Deion Sanders can go into a living room. He knows what it's like to be that kid. He knows what it takes to make it. He also understands that, he made an entire career of being himself, and he's going to let his players be themselves. I think he's smart enough to know that he can hire good coordinators, and he can go in there and talk to recruits and allow them to be themselves. And I think Scott's right. I think there's a potential that he's going to stay one step ahead of everybody and will win a national championship at a big school when he gets an opportunity.
Unless the rules change. I mean, you're spot on, Jim. He speaks the language of those.
Unless the rules change, you're right. Yeah,
right. But he's speaking the language that the recruits are speaking, and that developing that rapport, that's huge. And he gets that right out of the gate. He's been there, done that at all levels, and such an incredible motivator. Look, who wouldn't want to play for him? I mean, seriously, who wouldn't want to play for this guy? He'll run through a wall for you and make you want to run through a wall for him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think rapport is the best word, because it's not just recruiting for me. There are a bunch of coaches who can recruit well in college football. We have three fan bases here who recruit pretty well. What Deion Sanders does, though, so far, is he gets kids to play up. He gets kids to play hard. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, other than Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, most of the guys on that roster, and I do mean most of, came from smaller programs than Colorado. I think 10 of them came from Jackson State. Yeah. So this isn't like they're overflowing with talent, but they are playing hard. They are playing disciplined football so far. They're not doing stupid things that you might expect of kids that are being out-talented to do. Now, again, they've played TCU and they've played Nebraska. Neither of those programs are really, really good in 2023. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Deion has to step up in competition against a USC. But I think the secret to any football is getting guys to believe they can win and then playing hard towards that goal. And so far, that's what he's doing to me, that stands out for me more than anything else. The other thing I think people just hate is that he's honest about the process. If you suck, you're not going to be here. And we all know that all of our programs do that. They just don't talk about it. We talk about how we take care of our kids, and we'll put them on medical scholarship, and we'll do all these things, but they're not going to play. And if they want to go somewhere else, well, that's sad, but we'll facilitate that. He's a lot more blatant about, you're not good enough to be here. You're not going to be here.
It's almost
and I
like
think that rubs a lot of the coaching community the wrong way.
Well, he's still Deion the player when it comes to that. Like Deion was that way when he was a player too. He was, and I remember him being sort of like, I hated him until he became a Cowboy, because he was that guy that everyone hated. I think Scott's right. He's going to continue to figure out the system unless the old white guys get a chance to change the system, which they could do. But I even feel like if he gets Colorado into a bowl game, that's a big, big, big win for that program. And I don't know that the sky's not the limit. And he looks really good in a cowboy hat and sunglasses. And I think he's rocking it. So go for it, Coach Prime.
Hey, Colorado has a tradition of rocking the boat. What Bill McCartney did in the 80s to get Colorado on the map to begin with, by bringing in guys that wouldn't have typically gotten a look at Colorado, and bringing in the quote, the unwanteds, especially from California. There's a great 30 for 30 on that. And McCartney built that program. Prime's kind of Deion Sanders is following the exact model of that, but in new rule set and just doing it better than anybody else. And it's making the old white guys mad, just like what Jim said. It's making them
I just
mad.
think like I can't imagine like if you're a young black kid in an urban area or backwoods, and you've got stodgy white guy who can recruit, but you've also got a guy like Dion that's saying, I've been where you've been. I've done the big program and did it my way, and I became this thing. Former owner of the Austin Wranglers AFL champions, baby. Nobody talks about that when he won the Arena Football League.
There's a reason nobody talks about that, Jim.
Season ticket holder, baby. Austin Wranglers. They were like $30 for the whole season. It was the best. But yeah, I don't know. I know it's easy to kind of crap on the story, but I'm loving it and I'm here for the ride.
I think he's most successful. The last thing I'll say on this, he's authentic. He's genuine. He's himself.
I think that's it. He can't be fake because everybody knows who he is because he's always been so public with his persona.
Speaking of authentic, I expect us to all have 3 authentic beatdowns this week, with Arkansas being probably the most tenuous of those 3. And I don't know that BYU's up to the task, but 3 more non-conference games before all 3 teams get into their conference slates. BYU is at Arkansas tomorrow at 6:30. Texas hosts Wyoming, who I guess gave a good showing in week 1 against somebody.
I actually watched them play Tech. I had gotten back from the ball game.
That's why I was looking at it.
And I got a chance to watch them. I don't think this is a cakewalk for Texas. They play strong, disciplined football. And I do think the difference between this week is the difference between other Longhorn teams post Mac Brown and what could be different is, do they now put on do they put that same level of effort and discipline into playing a team that they should beat, or did they just get up for Alabama one time? And I think that will really be what will tell the story of this season more than just last week.
Man, I think you're if Texas comes out on fire in the first half, that means that there's no layover. There's no hangover from the Alabama game whatsoever. And these guys are locked in and dangerous, and Texas could run the table. I'll be completely honest. They have the talent to do it. If they are that laser focused, what I expect will happen, what typically happens in a situation like this, is there'll be some complacency and struggling in the first half. And then the second half, Texas will come out and push Wyoming off the field. I expect that. But if they come out of the gate and they blow Wyoming out, there's a lot of hope in Austin at that point. This is the perfect game to have after the Bama game to really tell who your team is and what you're about.
You've got Wyoming, and then right after that, you've got Baylor and Kansas. And who would have guessed that Wyoming's probably the hardest of the 3 of those games going into Oklahoma week?
Certainly not Baylor.
Yeah, that's
it's really sad too. I really feel bad for what's happened to Baylor.
He almost said that with a complete straight face.
I'm being sarcastic for those who are listening.
All right, so we're all predicting a pretty big beatdown, I think. Let's talk about BYU Arkansas, because that's a lot more interesting than A&M Louisiana Monroe, which will prove nothing, by the way. Just we could win by 50, it won't matter. BYU Arkansas, Scott, what's happening?
It's going to be a really tough game. BYU hasn't faced anybody the first 2 games. They've had a couple of big wins. They played Southern Utah. Woo!
Is there a Southern Utah? It's not the biggest state.
There is a Southern Utah now. I think they play in the Southland, actually, or something like that. But anyway, they
United States, South, and Utah. Sure, because it's 2023.
We live in a world where Stanford and California are on the Atlantic coast. Just go along with it. Okay,
I'm good.
Go with it. I think that BYU comes in as a very talented team. I think that they're well coached. I don't think they match up talent-wise with Arkansas, but Arkansas has been extremely good on defense, better than the people expected on defense. The defense has truly been at times dominant, completely dominant in the first 2 games, which you should be against Western Carolina and Kent State. The offense is where help needs to be found, and there needs to be some solidity and consistency on the offensive line. If we can get that, then we're going to move the ball efficiently and beat them like we beat them last year. The BYU fans, I think, has to be credited. They hosted Arkansas fans last year and were amazing. And apparently, by all accounts, the BYU fans coming into Northwest Arkansas for the game this weekend, again, are incredible. So I just kind of want to give kudos to BYU fans who are traveling really well.
How many new Mormons did they make?
Terribly. Yeah, there's a lot. There's so many Mormon jokes that are probably bouncing around in my head that I'm going to leave those all sitting on the table. Maybe next week, if we win, then I'll share those. But I think a lot of times, especially in the SEC, you have some fan bases that travel and make asses of themselves. So whenever you see a fan base that's traveling and being like really, really cool, I want to call that out. So way to go. So.
And I think on that game, Arkansas is an 8-point favorite, and unless San Marcos native Ty Detmer is taking snaps, I don't think it's that close. But I do hope that they enjoy Arkansas's pretty at this time of year. I assume it's hot as balls here, so I don't think it's as close as the 8 points.
Did Ty Detmer ever recover from A&M dislocating both his shoulders in one game?
That's like the one bowl game that's not a Longhorn game that I vividly remember watching with Andy Epperson and his dad. And his dad was that kind of burly Texas guy. He goes, well, they just showed him what Texas football is all about down here in the state of Texas. And like he has like both shoulders were just like,
I can't move.
I don't care. Get out there, boy.
They shoved one back in place and then they dislocated the other one. Stay down.
Wow.
This is going to be for the best, Ty. This is going to be for the best. Just stay here. Just stay.
And in a completely meaningless game in College Station at 3:00 tomorrow on the SEC Plus network. Who cares? This game is meaningless. It doesn't matter. Connor Wigman's probably going to throw for 500 yards, and the players are going to tell you that they're angry and they're not going to settle for what happened last week. And it doesn't matter until we play a real opponent, and that unfortunately will be Auburn 2 weeks from now. We'll see what happens. This week is inconsequential. You just hope that nobody gets hurt.
It's inconsequential
and you hope everyone has fun.
Unless Monroe scores at least 21 or 25 on you or something, then
I'm not worried about. I don't think Louisiana Monroe can score 25 points. I don't think that's a thing they can do. Not against A&M, just in the air. Having said that, I'm not worried about the offense. And I will say this: for all of the hand-wringing and consternation that was over Jimbo's ego, he seems pretty pleased not to be carrying a binder full of plays around the sideline and being able to watch the game. Now, maybe he should get a little bit more involved in some decisions that are happening, but he feels like it's really happy. He gets paid $80 million a year to sit around and watch the game. But Petrino's going to score points. I'm not worried about an App State repeat. I mean, sure, it could happen. I really don't think it's going to. I don't think the team is as beat down as the fans are, but it doesn't matter. We're going to get after the quarterback this week. Guess what? We're going to try to blitz, and then we'll go against Auburn, and we'll do nothing. We'll sit in a 3-man front the entire game and drop guys into coverage and let Auburn run all over the field. That's what we're going to do. And until we don't do that shit, it doesn't matter what you do against Louisiana Monroe.
Scott, you're already ready for old veggie teeth with his burner phone to light y'all up next week, aren't you?
Scott, I propose a new name for the show called Yell Fight Therapy.
Coach Prime to make his A&M debut.
What'd you say, Jim?
Welcome to Yell Fight Therapy for Andy. We're gonna go through.
There's no therapy. This whole season is pointless.
We believe in nothing, Lebowski.
Do we end it there?
We promise, even though it's pointless, please keep listening.
I don't even have the Astros consistently winning to distract me from this bullshit this year. At least last year, I could turn on the Astros game. They're going to win the World Series in a few weeks.
They still are.
All right. We see. That's a different show for a different time, but for this, we're at our end because Scott has work and the rest of us are just done. I'm Andy Tomcheson. That's Scott McIntyre. And that's James Christopher. This is Yell Fight Sooie. Have a great college football weekend and keep Art Briles off your sidelines.